Welcome, everyone, to Taking a Seat at the Boardroom. Today, we're going to be discussing the future of IT services with some amazing guests. But before we get into that, I want to preface that none of us here are trying to preach to you or tell you how to run your business. Everyone here has expertise from their own world. We're simply looking to share what's been working for us and some ideas you might consider and where we think the industry is heading as far as how small and medium-sized businesses are going to consume services. So with that, let's go ahead and introduce everyone. I'm Dom Kirby, manager of cloud solutions at Pax8, and a cybersecurity evangelist, just like our next guest, Matt Lee. We always stream together. You all know Matt. Joining us today, we have Ryan Cromar, the official chicken wing connoisseur, although today I think he's more of a burger connoisseur based on the classic Pax8 swag he's rocking. We have Ken Patterson. If you don't know Ken Patterson, you probably should. Come to our events. You'll get to know him real well. He's our director of community here at Pax8. We have Dan Johnson, CEO of Machine Logic, and we have Juan Fernandez. So let's run through some quick introductions. Tell us about yourself, Dan. Let's start with you.
Hey, everybody. I'm Dan Johnson. I'm CEO of Machine Logic out of Denver, Colorado. We're about a 35-person MSP, Microsoft Gold partner, very proud Pax8 partner, and we really focus in on the commercial space, typically with customers 100 to 1,000 in size. We really focus in on 365 and Azure and kind of cloud identity and where we're headed with security.
Awesome. Dan has some great stuff in the security section going on at his MSP, so it'll be a really exciting conversation. Juan, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, Juan Fernandez, CEO of the MSP Growth Coalition. Recently exited a successful MSP. It took from zero to about almost 20 million in about 6 years. So learned a lot about sitting in the boardroom and having a conversation with, how to go to market, and built a lot of great processes and procedures that hopefully I can share with the group today.
Awesome. And Juan, you dressed for the boardroom today. It looks like you're sitting in the boardroom.
Got it.
That's
We're
awesome.
in the boardroom.
Ken, tell us about yourself for those that don't know.
Oh, Ken Patterson, Director of Channel Community. I was an MSP, much like these other gentlemen here, for 20 plus years before joining the dark side. The dark side in general, not Pax8. And I am basically your Pax8's in-house MSP when it comes to getting to know the community and having a better understanding of what the MSPs want. And that is my primary function, is making sure that both Pax8 knows what the MSP community wants and getting what the MSP community wants into our group. So, and who better to have than Matt and Dom and Cromar internally to help with that.
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to have all you guys with us. I know you know Matt, and I know you know Cromar because you guys are on a lot of different streams. So let's dive right in. And the whole purpose of this, I think, is a lot of conversations we've all had, and I think you're all having with different folks throughout the channel community. And that is, I think, the way we think about technology and the way we think about how small businesses are or should consume technology, right, is changing, right? And we're rapidly coming up on this cliff, as you call it, Matt. So let's start with just a high-level overview of where we're going, and whoever wants to start, jump right in.
I'll kick it off. I know it's hard to believe that I might want to go first. And
Matt Lee wants to talk. Hold on, everybody.
Let's just hold up. There goes the show.
So we started this, we started this world in technology where you had this real gap of those are the smart folks, right? You had a disengaged client. You had many whiz bangs to configure and this port and this IRQ setting and all of these things. But as time's going on, we're kind of normalizing to the consumption of large-scale cloud services, large-scale identity services, things that are starting to have a less number of variables in the field. But at the same time, you also have cybersecurity becoming a massive, massive part of this as a motion perspective from small to mid-sized business. And you have more and more people starting to realize that that technology is an investment, and that better technology makes me better than my competitor, and that faster and easier, more scalable technology helps me win in business. And so I say this a little bit on the person that wants to be sitting in the boardroom and wants to have a seat at the table, as most MSPs do, but we're heading towards a cliff. And what I mean by that in the short form is that the things we do today will be commoditized. They already are being commoditized. They'll become scripts. They'll become Angry Birds working on my iPhone. And as you start seeing those kind of easy to use technology solutions happen, our industry that has been built on I'll bill you this many hours, I'll charge you this much an hour, but if you buy block rates, I'll charge you this much an hour. And if you go to managed services, we'll charge you next flat fee. But as you see that flat fee consumption happen, you're also seeing the traditional value statements that we bring to the table dissipating. And so we have to now become business advisors. We have to now become technology advisors that bring people from a strategic perspective all the way down to a tactical perspective to delivering their solutions with the better technology to beat their competitor. And so that's the short form of this, but we're starting to head into a space where if you wanted to be an MSP, it's a lot more like being an attorney or a CPA than it is going to be being like a traditional plate spinning technologist. And by that, I kind of used to compare it to janitors until one of my janitors almost punched me in the face. But the point is that we're going to have to be professional consultants. We're going to have to sit down and say, Dan Johnson, how can I make your business better? How can I understand you more? How can I deliver technology? How can I train your people? How can I empower you? And those are going to be things that are harder to differentiate yourself in as we start commoditizing most of what we do and what we know. So
Matt Lee,
I'll let everybody run with that.
I want to take two things from what Dom said and from what you said. First with you, Matt just had a short story. Everybody, I mean, that's amazing. That was the shortest I've never seen. And by the way, eloquent.
Might be a record.
By the way, Matt, it was
might
perfect,
be the shortest,
but it might be the shortest story I've ever heard you tell. It was really good though. And it's spot on. But to how Dom led this thing off is the thing that I always try to bring it back to, and is don't be afraid when you listen to these things and you think people are trying to drive you to something or trying to push you in a direction. Everybody on this call right now understands the same thing. There is no silver bullet, right? Matt Lee, that's your favorite line, right? There is no silver bullet. Yeah. So no one here is trying to tell you, hey, you need to do this or your business is going to die. What we're trying to do is give you different options and point you in the direction, as Matt Lee so eloquently pointed out, as there is a direction that this is going in, and you need to be more consultative, or else it will start to get harder and harder to do it the way things were being done in the past. And you can see that path. So, as eloquent as Matt just put it, I want to reiterate the fact that you should be listening to people as they discuss this. And anybody who tells you, if you don't do it this way, you're all done. Those are the people you could steer away from. But Dom, the way you started this thing off is perfect. That's how MSPs have to think. Okay, they're not trying to tell me this is what you have to do. They're giving me some ideas of how I can take my business and bring it into this. Right.
Well, I think if everyone watching really applies anything we discussed today, you're all going to do it differently. And that's the beauty of business ownership, is we're all building our own little organism.
But less differently than the thousands of
less different
before.
Yeah, from a nerdy perspective, right? It's a lot less different, right? We have this ubiquitous technology stack we operate in. But I think how we run a business and the DNA that forms our entities is going to be totally different. And it has to be that way. That's what competition is, right? If we all did the same thing, it's just a chain of stores, essentially, right? So yeah, it's really important to take whatever you want to and apply it in your own way as we start thinking about this, Cliff.
But
and
I do think you guys...
Matt... Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Don.
No, I said before we went live, if we don't step on each other, it's not real. So go ahead.
I'm going to jump in then. I think you guys touched on a couple of key points there, though, which is I think partners, while Ken, you might be true that there's not a silver bullet, there are some distinct, clear questions that you need to be able to answer, which is what's your role in the equation? What value do you bring to the table? And what are you delivering from a business outcome perspective to that client? And I think what we've talked about as we've kind of kicked around this concept of moving from MSP 1.0 to 2.0 and now perhaps into 3.0 is, what is that? What is the value that I bring? What is my role? So you kicked around the idea of a more of a business consultant, more of a technology consultant. I think that there's MSPs have been good about trying to define what their role and the value they bring is. I think what you are actually delivering is changing rapidly, and it's going to change dramatically in the coming years. I think we've done a lot of work to, like you said, Matt, I'm going to deliver X amount of managed labor. I'm going to fix things with an efficient wrench. And
You know what that
while
is
that's
though
gonna-
is it's the sell me this pen conversation,
yeah,
right? Like
Yeah.
it's a
Oh
widget,
man, you're about to
right?
get.
Yeah.
That's where I jump in.
yeah, but that's what's changing right now. Now we're starting to having to focus on security outcomes. We're having to focus on efficiency and automation outcomes. We're having to focus on long term things that have very little to do with fixing someone's printer. Yes, those things still need
Yeah.
to happen, but the value equation has changed. So
You know,
I
Tim
would say
Choquette
this.
said this. So hold on.
Yeah.
Tim says, today
Go
we
ahead.
have so many topics to choose from that we can enable,
Right.
right? Compliance, cybersecurity, secure remote worker, modern workplace, evolution topics. But that's accurate, right? That is the positive in front of us, is that if I can walk into Dom and say, Dom, you have 5 servers. They're running on local bare metal in your closet, as Dom says, right? Or metal. And you're tied to Active Directory, you have all these limitations. And guess what? Your competitor at the normal ice cream shop or whatever it might be is going to start up a new business. They'll pay $20 a month. They'll have zero infrastructure. They'll tie into 5 main cloud apps. They'll do it extremely securely. I could even script zero trust, right? It's a big buzzword. I can script it. I can
Right.
make it the same for that company as it is for the next company. And the only thing I change is one GUID, one tenant ID and a password and a secure secret. That's all I change.
Yep.
And everything else becomes the same. And those high value topics are me coming in and saying, Dom, this is why for you to survive as an entity, for you to thrive as an entity, you have to understand that your competitor starting up tomorrow is going to be better and faster. They're going to be able to hire people in technology that won't go to your company, right? I had a girl that was our marketing person. She walked out with a master's in marketing and came in and said, I had the worst experience at this other company. They made me map an S drive, and I had no idea what that was, and all I've ever used. And what you realize is the talent is going to start going to your competitors. And this isn't the MSP's competitors. These are small to mid-sized businesses' competitors. And if I can come in and say, I'm going to make you more compliant as we start seeing the whittling away of privacy laws, as we start seeing your death and through attrition from those failures, I can bring better security. I can help secure your remote workers and make them feel empowered to drive your business. I can make modern workplace. Like, yeah, that's exactly what we're preaching, Tim. Like, I feel like you've been reading my diary. But
But do you guys feel like the MSPs need to learn how to consult folks on all those different topics now? Because before, to your point, it was, hey, I'm going to come in, I'm going to fix X, Y, and Z. It's a very PO invoice kind of relationship, right? Whereas now it's turned into this, I got to know all these different focal points of the channel, and I got to be able to speak to them and how it fits with your business. And it just has become this almost like less technical, more like you guys are saying, this technical consultant. And if you don't have that capability, you're not going to do well as an MSP. You're no longer going to get by just being a great engineer, in my opinion.
Would Matt Lee say less technical and more tactical?
He would. Accurate.
Oh,
that's absolutely
the
more
thing,
tactical.
you know, when you got to pull the chair out at the boardroom, you're not having technical conversations, right?
Correct.
Like those days are gone. I remember my favorite conversation ever having was bringing a old, what were those things called where you stuck them in and you actually, I can't even think of the name of them.
Zip drive?
No, it was a tape drive. I was using the tape drive. But
No, he said zip drive, which is even better. In its own
I've
right.
got a floppy disk somewhere around here.
Yeah.
and it's just relating the technology to the age of in which we actually function, right? X is a service, customer experience is a service, business operations as a service, marketplaces, like those are the conversations that we need to be having with our customers versus it's about the speeds and feeds. Like they don't want to know about that. They could care less. Like, how are you enabling me to be quicker, faster, to Matt's point, one all day long with that, right? So, you know, having that strategic conversation about here's the way I improve your business, here's the way I empower you, the remote workforce. But again, back to the beginning where we started, it's all about the outcomes. Like, you know, Dan was saying, like, if you don't know the outcomes that your program delivers, which is not monitoring, maintenance, and management, it's not that anymore, guys. That's table stakes.
That's
we
table
can automate
stakes.
every piece
That
of
is
that.
table stakes. Yep.
Right.
Putting the numbers in putting the numbers in my 1040 is table stakes as a secret, right? Like I would expect them to get typed in the boxes at some point. I wouldn't ask.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's important when we start to think about strategy around how you're delivering your technology solutions, right? And if you can do it through a marketplace where you can bundle all your programs, processes, and procedures for meaningful outcomes, you're winning above the other MSPs that are still having that old conversation, right? And I know, Dan, when we talk about that in MSP land, like that's how we enable BCIOs to have that conversation, right? It's not about the speeds and feeds around our program. It's about the meaningful outcome. So that's probably one big piece of advice I would say is probably the most important. If anybody takes it out today, is understand what outcomes you deliver. What are you talking about in the boardroom? Because you're not talking about a firewall and its configuration.
Yeah, right. And are you asking your customers what their desired business outcomes are? Right? Like some businesses are in growth mode and they want to add people, they want to add customers, they want to do this, that, and the other. Some businesses are like, man, we've got, we're an accounting firm, we've got 15 CPAs, like we're pretty comfortable where we're at. We're not looking to grow, we're looking to maintain. Your program or programs, right? Your options need to drive those business goals, right? Technology empowers business, right? It's not the other way around. Technology should be driving whatever goals the business has. I'm a big fan of hypergrowth companies. Like it's super fun. It's raw chaos. That's why I work at PAX 8, right? And they're really hard to keep up with, and the program has to be built to keep up with that, right? It's totally different than building a program for that law firm that has 4 partners that'll never add a 5th partner, right? Might add an associate, but they practice a certain kind of law, and that's what they do, and we know how to support them, and I'm going to know how to support them in 5 years. I don't know how to support the hypergrowth company tomorrow, right? I don't know what craziness is going to cook up in between those board meetings. So it really also, you have to understand your client's goals as business.
So I have a question here for Juan and Dan then, since they're, either just coming out of it or still doing it, but we all this change that we're talking about really for me is taking the sales out of it, right? And you're not trying to sell them something, you're trying to help them, you're trying to consult them, right? So for you guys, what would you say to, because I see it all the time, what would you say to MSPs that are struggling to get to the next level and they're putting it out there, hey, we need a new salesperson, what would that person be now? Because I really believe the sales should be out of it altogether. We talk about the consultative side, like Matt says, your CPA is not trying to sell you on anything. They just basically deliver you the service. The same idea with your doctor. So for you two, what do you say to the MSPs now that are struggling with this, saying, hey, I'm looking for a salesperson. What should they be looking for? And also, are we still calling them salespeople?
Man.
Yeah. Go ahead, Juan.
Go ahead. So I call them solutionaires, right? Like I get excited about this because we shut that down. Like we stopped selling, and anybody that ever listens to anything I ever say, I'm like, stop selling. During the pandemic, stop selling, start positioning value. We grew during the pandemic. Oh man, it was all about positioning our value to the, even on the front end, the salespeople were just qualifying, punting balls to VCIOs to further qualify to find our ideal client profile. Like, that's all about strategy. Like I want to be able to deliver on my promise in every aspect of business. And the only way I can do that is without over promising from the sales side, right? Because sales will come up with all kinds of fun stuff to say.
Stops all viruses.
Like,
Yeah,
like we're 100%, we're 100% compliant. Like you're like 100% compliant.
This is great.
I got the HIPAA seal on my website.
Yeah,
it's good.
Drew, ask Dom Kirby this. I've said this many times. As a salesperson, if you don't give me parameters, I will sell the moon. I will
Right.
And to Juan's point, I think most MSPs that have been successful in the last 2 years have adopted is educate and enable mindset, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is part of the challenge, though. If we're talking about this evolutionary step that most MSPs need to take into business outcomes and into security outcomes and into growth outcomes, well, you have to understand what that is, but enough that you can educate your customer on this is the value I'm bringing. I'm going to educate you on the steps that are necessary and the benefits that I'm going to provide. And then the deal should, if you line up the education and the value proposition properly, if it's a fit, it should sell itself. Now, but back to Ken's point, you'd still have to sell. I mean, let's not fool ourselves.
You do have
still
to sell.
To have sales professionals in that they have to be able to be you can't just have an engineering conversation. You can't just have an invoice conversation. You have to have a meaningful conversation with that business leader to convince them that your way is the way to go.
Yeah.
But imagine like as a business owner, right? And you get, I don't know, 4 or 5 calls a day from insert trunk MSP here, right?
Right.
Got a great RMM and this super cool AV called Schwebschroot and all this craziness, right? And I got the best widgets. And you're gonna have the best firewall. And then, Dan, you call and you're like, hey, what's going on with your business? Like, what's keeping you up at night? What's bothering you? And that's the whole conversation. That's a totally different conversation than that cold caller calling about firewalls and junk, right? I've never met a single client that's like, man, that's a nice firewall. Look at that firewall.
Brand loyalty
is
still a thing, but I think people are, fixing it with one particular widget or one particular brand is going to go by the wayside, because what we're going to do, we're going to choose the best tool that meets that customer's needs. Now, there's still a need to standardize on tools and on brands and on partnerships and whatnot. But at some point, I've learned over the last couple of months, endpoint is endpoint, right? I need to protect it. I need a solution, and I'm more interested in how that endpoint solution integrates with my entire security stack, rather than getting hung up on the brand or the particular capabilities of one specific software.
Well, and I think we're in, Tim says this, he says, hey, we're in the current era of technological evolutionists, aka Edison, Tesla, Westinghouse. And I think what we're also talking about there is, now I have an electrician. I might tease him on the job site and call him Sparky, but I damn well better understand that I'm asking that person to make sure that I have electricity to deliver my needs. I know what electricity is. I know what I don't want to happen. And I think what Tim says here is quite accurate, is we're actually living in this in-between land, right? My CPA doesn't have a salesperson, and they're a huge CPA.
Yeah.
My attorney doesn't have a salesperson, and they're a huge attorney. They have some marketing, they have some drive market, but they don't have the same things. Why? And I think it's because we come from a world where we're selling commodities that are converting into pro services. They always kind of were. They were already disguised that way, and we put the revenue in different ways. And there's a long time where VARs put in their billing labor into the price of the markup, right? Like there was these type of things that are just dancing around the point that at some point I need to know about the surgical room we're about to step into. What lights did you guys choose to use? And by the way, which scalpel are you going to cut me with? And what fat spreader are you going to hold my skin open with? Like, none of that happens. And at some point, I think the problem will be that even though we're going from far more complex to far less complex, in my opinion, around technology, we're still doing that in a way where we're actually going to get to a point where the community can never really know it all. They can't. The business owner's not going to understand it all, nor do they understand all of the law, nor do they understand all of the tax code in various different states in the United States and foreign entities and different governments. No, they don't, but they trust that person. And when I say we're in the in-between time, it's kind of because we're having to convince what doesn't exist as a licensure, what doesn't exist as a known business entity. There's nothing that says Dan Johnson and Matt Lee know what they're talking about. You should go do business with them. But when you get into these other industries where it's far too complex, far too fast moving, far too many pieces to regulate and do those things, those other industries have understood to have some self-regulatory body that starts to normalize the output that Dan and Matt can only do this badly. Mm-hmm. Now, they can get much better, but they can only do this badly, or else we fire them. They can't be an attorney anymore. They can't be a doctor anymore. They can't be a CPA anymore. And so as we're going through this change, the Edisons, the Westinghouses, the things that shaped our future, I think really is what makes my skin tingle about being in this time. Around security and technology, we are starting to transition to where we are going to be advisors, using 9 of the same scalpels that all are efficacious as scalpels, right? 9 of the same fat spreaders. And to Dan's point, we'll pick which fat spreader and which scalpel and make sure they work together well. And I don't know that fat spreaders and scalpels have all that much of a crossover, but the point being, I do believe that as we get normalized.
Fat spreader when it's used on me?
Me, for sure.
I
go
was
ahead.
like, it kind of hit home with me when you said that though, Matt.
Yeah.
Fat spreader, really? But here's the thing. I would say that that's why you're seeing all these other entrants into our space, right? You're seeing accounting and legal and all in attorneys.
They already know how to do that part. Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the room and they're like, I'll just offer IT too. Like, that's why we're seeing that. So like the more 100%. That we don't start moving toward that, the more we're actually allowing someone to take our chair away from us, right? So it's essential that you get down that talk track now and start thinking about it, because
people are already having it, right? Me and Dan have been talking about this for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And it's on the horizon. To your point, man, I really do appreciate your
my silly analogies.
Yeah. Although I did slightly take offense to the fat part. I was like, is that me?
They call it that because every subcutaneous layer of skin has fat, right? Like it's not an amount of fat spreader. It's just simply, but yes.
Actually, I'm still a little nervous because Cromar made a comment about selling the moon. Does that mean my moon's not going to get delivered, Cromar?
You already put the down payment on that. I call that my Starlink modem.
Yeah, you're getting like a mid-month quarter moon kind of thing, man. I know I was telling you full moon, but one thing I wanted to bring up, and we've talked about this on streams before, is here's a really great point, and I think Ken made a joke in the chat with us, is the person that cuts Matt's hair has to have a license to do so.
Yep. Yeah.
The person that services a mega $1 million company or corporation has zero licensing to do so.
And I can destroy you in 5 seconds. I can leave MFA off.
And I have to give a shout out to Cam Goldman at PAX 8. He mentioned this to me ages ago, and it made a ton of sense. And it's like, man, I trust these guys with my business, my livelihood, my entire ecosystem, and they have no accountability really. But the person that shaves my beard went to 3 years of school for it, right?
And can have their license taken away by the Board of Cosmetology.
If they do it wrong. Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the reality.
There it is.
Doctors.
Who let him on here?
But I think you bring up a great point, Cromar, which is, we've seen a big wave of MSPs that are interested in CMMC level 3 compliance because they think that that's the answer. And then for certain MSPs and for certain clients, that is the answer. But, as much as we don't want to have regulation in the MSP industry, as much as we don't want that, we would all benefit from standards, right? We would benefit from, have you met this certain criteria? Certainly our customers would be able to navigate the partner ecosystem and the vendor ecosystem, because let's not leave the vendors out of it. They need their own little rating system too, right? They update code, what their security options are, all these things. But back to the partner, we don't have that standard right now, and it's probably coming very quickly, right? Yeah. And we can either create that as
it'll either come,
or it can be forced upon us.
Right, and it'll either be organized, right? It'll be the self-regulating body we're talking about. Yeah. It'll get a little more chaotic, and it'll be legislative, and that's going to suck. Let's just be real. Like we're, at least in America, like we're not great at legislation here. Let's be honest. But it could also be really chaotic and just come out of case law, right? Someone sues someone and some precedent gets set by some county court in nowhere, right? and that's bad, right? Because then it makes it to appellate courts and suddenly it's this federal level case law built out of hearsay from a litigation. That's what scares me the most, is that it becomes case law that has very little research behind it comparative to like a legislative law where it was decided because someone lost a lawsuit or a criminal case. Right?
Merck right now, Merck and Giant Insurance.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. Merck and their insurance, right? Imagine that for the MSP space, where some judge and jury somewhere just makes a law by accident. Like case law is an accident, realistically, right? So it's kind of nuts to think about. So I would strongly support, some sort of self-governing body, whether that is, the likes of a CompTIA or just, a group of powerhouses that get together and start building standards, because that's how any standards body works, right? That's how the internet was formed.
CompTIA backed out of that, right? They were on their way to something like that, and they were getting beat up by it, I think, and kind of pulled out. I know there's a couple others trying to pull some things together, but I agree with you. That's probably the way it has to go. Yeah, I'm going to need a few pages for Eric's comment here.
Yeah, Eric goes on after this to say if their customer doesn't know what they need and they don't know how to propose those solutions, they fall back to what they know and they do the things they know how to do, right? And I think that's the biggest point, is that if we were to fast forward 5 years, right? If we just look at what the 5-year state or 7-year state looks like here, right? People generally are using cloud services, SaaS services tied together with identity. Right? You have a central identity source. You have third-party services through SAML or OIDC, which we wouldn't say to the client, but single sign-on, right? And that's pretty much it. And if you need to print, it's just going to a printer or a print service. It's not right. You're not living in the world where you're kind of having to deal with all these thousands of variables. And so if all customers are doing that, the question we have to ask in 5 years is, how does someone like us, how does a managed service provider, compared to the vendor that just happens to sell that software, making it easy and just work, how do we add value to that? How do we as an ecosystem make that customer better with it? It's going to come in the form of training.
Yeah.
It's going to come in the form of integrations, automation, time savers, making something look really good. When a customer signs up for something, they get the email that says it's shipping, they get the email that says it's delivered, they get those type of things are the type of things that a competitor can do almost instantly out of the box with a lot of the native things if you coach them the right way. Right? If you look at ERP solutions, they've been around forever, right? Enterprise resource and planning. Very large software, giant pain in the butt, but very skilled and curated third-party implementers that bring that to a reality inside of an organization, right? That drive it, make it work into all the processes, the robotic process automation, all the things they do. And if you think about that, that's what we're going to be. We're going to be these third-party implementers that drive the same tools, the same Google, the same Amazon, the same Microsoft, that drive those same core components to make a business different than their competitor. And we have this unfortunate task of taking the losers, the ones that are all on infrastructure, the ones that have infrastructural investments and massive history of doing it this way because we've always done it this way, and trying to help them catch up with their competitor who's going to beat them.
Yep.
In most small to mid-sized businesses.
Well, I just wrote about that, right? And that how enterprise has been years ahead on digital transformation for a long time, since digital transformation was a word, right? Like the biggest companies on the planet have done it far faster than the smallest, which sounds so counterintuitive. Right,
Well,
you've got the 900-pound gorillas in the room doing backflips,
kind
right?
of,
And everyone else is crawling.
Somewhat
Well, you know, they
Yeah.
crashed a couple times, but you know, it works.
The thing about it though is the people, and you got to think about this, right? Because I do it too. The one thing that wins the most is when you give somebody a choice, they're always going to choose the cheapest one. And it's because I wasn't educated on the right choice to make, right? You know, I look for a car that is a good value at a low value price, and I won't buy a car that's super expensive, because maybe I can't afford it, but it's the same thing in technology, right? If we don't show the value behind it, I'm going to choose the cheapest one. And that's why we stay flat in this arena, because we're not educated on the right choice for our business. And that's back to your point, Matt, that business operations as a service component, that's where we're taking them, right? We're running their businesses for them through technology and allowing them to focus on businesses.
Which takes asking questions and knowing the company 100%. And knowing their business objectives and knowing what makes them profitable.
But
the greater challenge, I think, at some point too, though, is a lot of the MSP industry, even if you look a couple years into the future, we're still very focused on infrastructure.
100%.
Right? We are not. We in order to take that next evolutionary step, we're going to have to start to develop expertise in vertical industries. You might need to decide, I'm going to call on medical firms, and you're going to get to know those EHRs. You're going to, call on law firms to get to know the case management software, because if what we end up doing is becoming business advisors and we're focusing on integrations and automation and workflow, well, we darn well better know that workflow for that industry. And I think that's going to be a big step that we'll have to take as an industry, is starting to bring in that level of talent alongside our long-running history of infrastructure talent and see where that takes us.
Yeah.
Exactly. Made a good point here to the point is if we can make you feel confident in what we're trying to push, and maybe push is the wrong word, but what we're trying to get you to do with your business, if you feel confident about it and we can show you the business outcomes, or at least predict them, you're going to feel good about spending a little bit more money, because you're going to understand that it's an investment. And right now, we're still selling widgets, right?
Hey, but here's the point about selling the moon, though, is the first step. And we've done a good job here. Let's just clear the air. Ryan knows this more than anybody. But the first step in sales is to gain trust. And you already have trust. It's just what you do with it now, right?
Yeah.
So you have the opportunity to sell the BMW. It's just we're still selling cars that are less expensive, right? So,
well, Juan, to that point though, too, you're 100% right. But also, you have to know the customer. If you're just selling them a BMW when another vehicle will fit, right, fits them best, that's another thing, right? You got to make sure it's what they need, not just trying to sell them something at a higher price.
Very much so. You're right. I agree with you there. And to that point, but here's the thing. A lot of businesses want to move faster right now, right? They needed to be more nimble. They needed to be more flexible. Half of them got on the information superhighway with a Yugo with a flat tire and a busted windshield.
Still driving it too.
We're just like, hey man, call us. We're roadside assistance.
Why are you calling me out, Juan? What's up
I
with
didn't
that?
say that. I'm just saying.
It's a nice Yugo. It's good.
Yeah. And that's
It's got chrome rims on it.
Yeah.
It looks good sitting still. That's cool, right?
Right.
But those businesses that wanted to move faster, they bought the roadside assistance plan, and it didn't really help them get to the mechanic shop, right? They still are like, God, this car won't go when I push on the gas. That's the part I think we're talking about, is like, really, to Matt's point, I think this whole conversation is knowing your customer, right? Knowing their needs, their wants, and their fears, and addressing them in your program to make it meaningful.
But the reason I say Cliff, though, is if you think about it this way, think about a day in the life of an MSP. We're measuring CSAT, so we can make sure that tickets are getting opened and closed, and we don't have this root cause analysis. I don't have the same ticket load at Pax8 on our internal systems as most companies do. Why? I didn't have the same ticket load as most other companies as my MSP that was 170 employees and 30 some odd million in revenue. Why?
Automation.
Well, because once it just works, it just freaking works. Like in the beginning age of cars, you had to crank it and set timing on points and make sure that the fuel was right and make sure that right? Like that's not how it is. Now you have an automatic transmission and it runs whether it's cold, hot, or full of water.
You just push a button, right? And it figures out all that stuff for you.
That's
the technology's
right now, right?
gotten there. Yeah. Sorry,
that's the challenge, though, is erasing all of that technical debt, right? You mentioned the future customer who can immediately adopt, the startups that can immediately adopt cloud and SaaS and new security model. But we have this gob of existing businesses that are trying to get there. Some of them are, but now the current state of the MSP is we're trying to erase technical debt. Some of the debt that we ourselves created. Right,
some that we own
the tools with VPNs, and with servers.
Some we install it for them. I mean, it's ours. RMM, right? Like, if you had every client on Intune, would you have an RMM? No, not at all. My problem is because I have that technical debt, to Dan's point, I have to maintain that. And guess what's going to execute my client? My RMM, probably. Right. And so you start looking at these things and saying the technical debt is everyone's problem. It's not just the clients. It's also the MSPs. And, the advocation, I think one of the things that I've always said, and I legally cannot do this. I want to make sure any of my attorneys or other attorneys listening, if I started an MSP tomorrow and I know what I know now, I would simply pick the clients that were my Goldilocks clients and I'd bring them in. I would have people that either have very little reliance on their old infrastructure, very little reliance on their line of business application being something tied to infrastructure, and I would bring them in. And every time I brought in another one, they would have the same Microsoft scripts run at the same time with the same outcomes, the same MFA turned on, the same educational email, and the same path. It's the same walk. And if I could find just those customers and focus on them, I could have a way less technical density. I could hire 1 or 2 engineers to write scripts or third-party parties like Kelvin Trafalgar or Pax8 Pro or whatever it might be that runs those things. And I wouldn't have the same technical debt, and I'd be able to build a book of business of clients that should be able to beat your clients. Right? And it's, it's tipping the scale. And at the former MSP, I'm trying not to name names, but at the former MSP, we were talking about having a separate division that just operated under that new way of life, that just operated with only those clients, that was profitable on only those clients. Tim Choquette made this in the comments, but I've actually used his story before. He's got certain clients where he profits on their profit. He only makes money based on their profitability, right? Like literally makes a deal with them to say, I'm going to make you better.
That's a business advisor.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've done startup level CIO consulting for equity, right? Because I was like, man, I believe in you guys and you need help. Yep. And they believed in me and it worked. Trust me. Like the equity is great. If you can get that much trust with your clients, holy shit. Like you've really achieved something. And then obviously your skin in the game to make that customer succeed is 100%, right? Anything you do for that client, you're betting on their success.
And it always has been. It's not like MSPs haven't loved their clients. It's not like
no.
But I think the difference is we're more empowered now as MSPs than we ever have been to impact the client's bottom line versus their competitor. Right?
Or the top line even. Right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think that if you're delivering on all those points, Matt, it's interesting to see when you build those relationships like that. I have several customers that are the similar way that are like, dude, just come in and work with us. Like,
Yeah.
Juan, like when they trust you that much, and again, you got to give
They even
yourself.
let me look at them with one eye.
You got to get away
have
from
no
that,
choice.
right? You got to take your seat, and that's where I think this whole conversation is going. Is that we for so long have perceived ourselves as our own vendor, not allowing us to move past that mindset into being a true partner in understanding their business and getting into their business. We stayed outside as a vendor on purpose because we somehow had like this, maybe it was just, something going on psychologically where we don't allow ourselves to be that business partner. But I see it a lot. And when they break through that chain and go on to the other side, it's so much easier to engage with your customer and it's so much better, right? To Dom's point, like that's how you do it. As soon as you earn that level.
Like, how many employee barbecues of your customers did you guys go to?
Right.
Like, I feel like I went to 5 or 6 a year.
As round as I am, all of them.
But you are in
All right,
Texas, Juan, so
Right.
But that's all we do here.
It kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah.
We only got a couple minutes left, so I'm gonna go around the circle. We could talk all day, and maybe we should do a part 2. But for everyone's time, let's go around and do final thoughts. So Dan, what are you gonna close us out with?
Well, I think we didn't get deep into it today, but I think that the MSP world obviously is faced with a future where we have to get security under control. And it's going to drive that regulation conversation that we talked about. It's going to drive the business outcome conversation. And, a couple years ago, we were talking about, are we going to be an MSP or an MSSP? And now we know the answer is yes, you are going to be both.
Right, right.
And I think getting a game plan around that, figuring out who your security partners are going to be and what level of security you're going to deliver to your customers and what business outcomes, back to my original statement, you can deliver to your customers will paint you a very clear picture of where you're headed in the next couple of years. So, and thanks for having me on. It's fun.
I love it. This is a blast. We're gonna have to do part 2 because I don't feel like we got deep enough in this session. But Ken, your final thoughts.
Oh man, well I think as usual, I think everything Dan just said is spot on. But I'll just get to you simple basics of all of this because I know Juan and Matt and Ryan are going to have some cool stuff to say after this. Getting to the original point, do something. Don't get all nervous and wrapped up in all the craziness, that just got dropped on you with the fact that we need to get security rolling in the right direction and we need to be more consultative. And I know it's a lot to take in, but start with the first step. Do something. Go in a direction of these types of things and make that first step because I know how hard it is or how easy it is to get stuck in the weeds with the busy craziness that goes on with being an MSP. I see Dom and everybody shake their head because we've all been there. But get some ways to step out of those weeds for a few minutes and start to lay down a plan to start taking those first steps. And it can be baby steps, but if you don't make that move at all and you get stuck in the weeds, you'll be right where you are right now in a year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now. So my advice is start taking those steps. Start looking to these people as mentors and make phone calls. They're all willing to help, but get yourself out there and ask the questions on how do I make that first step.
Yep.
I love it. Matt would call that "Don't let perfect be the enemy of good."
Yeah,
I would.
And Juan, your final thoughts. Don't worry, Matt. You'll get your. I got you.
Matt's always going to get his turn. I will say this. One of the things that I will say, the only way that I got that company to that size was when I started at the beginning. Mm-hmm. From the day that I started that thing, I said, in 3 years, this is what I'm going to be looking like. In 4 years, what I'm going to look like. I had a plan on how exactly I was going to get there. I knew my stack. I knew what my help desk was going to look like. I knew my processes, my procedures, my deliverables. I knew my sales message. We tailored it along the way because we had to move and ebb and flow. And obviously I was coming in but there was a plan. So Ken, to your point, I'm going to kind of just feed off that, understand your outcomes, but to Dan's point, but Ken's right, do something, and that's create a plan around how to get where you want to go and then build strategy around how to get there. 100% agree with that. Your stack is easy. That's just whatever you want to put in there. Build a profit protection plan into your business is the best advice.
I like that. Profit Make sure you trademark that. That's really good.
The profit
I
protection
love it.
plan.
The profit protection plan.
That's
I'm going to shameless plug
like
because you're talking about measurements. They have all of us
Boom.
people leaders reading this book right here about OKRs, and I just started it, but so far I'm a big fan, and it's a great way to measure things.
I just
traditional.
added a little title to my name there under Juan's plan.
The people.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Beat him to it.
Protection plan.
All right, Cromar.
I feel like
Your closing
anytime Ken
thoughts.
just wanted to make a pee joke, so so one of the things that I've learned in my time is, and I'm going to steal this from Paul Redding from Compliancy Group. He said this a few years ago: learn how to become a business solution provider. What solutions are you providing to that business, and how do you convey what those are to that end customer so they understand how you're helping their business? You come in hot with a bunch of tech talk, it goes right over their head. It's how am I making your business better, easier, better experience for your employees, for your customers, your sales team, whatever those are. So think about how to be a BSP.
BSP.
Oh.
I'm not making up any acronyms
Oof.
today.
Hey, so roll the credits.
All right.
Matt's talking. Just roll the credits.
Yeah, just
Matt.
to get the hook. No,
Matt,
I'll
close
wrap
us
it up. I'll wrap it up really quickly. So I think the point is I want people to have something actionable to take away. So that there's two pieces to this. The first would be envision the future state, right? Even if you end up being wrong or close to the mark, but look at what 3 to 5 years needs to look like, right? Juan said that in his MSP, that's what he did, right? He had a plan. Well, the plan changed 1,000 times. So it's really the future state that you need to hold in its true vision, right? And if that future state has gaps in its understanding that you want to take to your clients, go learn it. I mean, that's kind of the basic. If you believe we're heading towards an all SaaS, all IAM or identity and access management and security model with zero trust built in because it's all cloud, then if you have gaps in any of those statements, there are 6 people on this call right now that would talk to you and educate. I spend my evenings speaking with MSPs. I don't charge for it. I don't mind helping. I have learned those things, and I've learned my own gaps. But my point is, as an MSP, you need to be able to talk about where the future state is, and then you need to start figuring out how to close those gaps in your order and your service delivery so that you can be there and do your profit protection plan and be a business solutions provider.
Profit protection.
There you go.
I love it. All right, I'm going to close us out. We are a couple minutes over, but thank you, everyone that stuck through. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll definitely talk about a part 2, Ken, with the mic drop. My fleeting piece of advice will be, remember that you work for people. You don't work for technology.
Amen.
Serve the people.
Amen.
We deliver
Please
technology.
do all the algorithm things, like, share, subscribe. Each and every one of us are available to you on LinkedIn. Just Google. We've all got faces for our profile picture, so it'll be easy to find us. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.